Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, nice to have you here today.
How are you this morning, Dr. Paul?
I'm doing fine, and
good.
We have a good program. We have a special guest,
Yes, yeah.
an activist, action in areas that we like, and his name is Jim.
Dan McKnight.
Dan McKnight. Sorry about that, Dan. Dan McKnight. But the reason is that he sort of likes what we're doing, or we're at least, corresponding, because he has a group that he started about a year ago, and he's military. He's an ex-military person, and he has people joining this, and the group is called Bring Our Troops Home.
Yeah.
That caught
Sounds
our
good.
attention.
Yeah.
Dan, welcome to the Liberty Report.
Thank you, Dr. Paul. It's nice to be here.
Well, good. Tell us a little bit about the group. You started a little over a year ago, and you have, I guess, the veterans in the group. You know, one thing that I thought about, this may not apply to you exactly, but when I was in the presidential campaigns, frequently a lot of college kids and young people would get interested and say, okay, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? And I sort of, turned it back on them. I said, do whatever you want to do. I wasn't going to give them an instruction just to get their attention. And it looks to me like you've done something, and that's why we have you on this program, by bringing the troops home. You've had military experience, so tell a little bit about how you'd made this decision to bring this group about.
Sure. When I was in Afghanistan in 2005, our lieutenant governor was promoted to governor in the middle of our deployment, and that was Jim Risch. He now serves as the chairman of the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations. Very powerful man, probably the second most powerful foreign policy person in the country after the president. But when he was our governor and the commander of the National Guard, we were serving in Afghanistan and had a very hard time getting basic supplies, uniforms, boots, gloves, goggles, things we needed to complete the mission. And out of frustration, I grabbed a satellite phone, and deep in the Pesh River Valley in northeastern Afghanistan, I climbed to the top of the hill, and I called a friend at back home who put me in contact with then Governor Risch. And I said, Governor, this is Sergeant McKnight, and I'm calling you from Afghanistan. I hope I have your attention. And he said, Dan, you've got my attention. What do you need? And I explained our situation. And he said, I've been the governor for about a minute. I don't really know what I can do, but I'm going to do something. And true to his word, within 48 hours, supplies were on their way to us. And my chain of command was upset, and they took away my satellite phone, but the mission went on. And I always held Jim Risch as kind of a personal hero. He was up on a pedestal of mine, and I really looked up to him. So this year, when he got promoted to the chairmanship of the powerful Senate Committee on Foreign Relations, I'd reach out to him one more time and see if he would be another.
Looks like we're lost our connection a little bit. Maybe it's coming.
Okay, Dan, do you hear us?
Maybe we'll recall him while we're getting ready. It's an interesting
there's
story.
every reason. Just when we really got interested in this story, we said we need to get him back on there and get this connection back, because he's had the experience, the military experience, and he's already taught me something more about Risch. And that he was an effective leader for a day or so. But now,
Here looks
now
like he's
as
back.
a political leader, he's not panning out.
Yeah. Dan, are you back with us?
I'm here.
Okay, good.
It's the fun of a live show. So you were on your phone, and now he's the Foreign Relations Committee chairman. Go ahead, please.
Correct. So when he became the chairman of the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations, I thought I'd reach out and try old Jim Risch one more time. And I wrote a guest opinion and submitted it to a local newspaper asking Senator Risch to support President Trump's efforts and campaign promises to find a way to end the war in Afghanistan and bring our troops home. And we submitted that guest opinion, and 9 newspapers around the state of Idaho ran it. And the next month, I got to see Jim Risch at a Chamber of Commerce event, and I publicly asked him if he had read the piece and what he would do to support it. And he said, Dan, I remember you. I remember our phone call. I've read your piece, and I agree with you. We're done with nation building. I'm through with it. And he made a very powerful policy statement in Boise, Idaho, and then got on a plane and flew back to Washington, D.C., and voted 3 times over the next 90 days to do exactly the opposite, basically to extend the United States presence in Afghanistan, Yemen, and Syria indefinitely. And so that's when we started Bring Our Troops Home. I thought it's time for veterans to come together and hold our elected leaders accountable and responsible for the words that they say at home, and make sure that they act the same way when they're in D.C.
Okay, let me follow up on this,
yeah,
and then Daniel will have a question for you. Just recently, the Idaho Republican Convention passed some resolutions that you had something to do with, and it was interesting that the senator was there, and actually the two of you were campaigning against each other. And it's always fascinating because we're pretty sarcastic when we think we can do much politically, but I would say you had a political success there. Tell us about that resolution that you got passed at the Idaho Convention.
Sure. We wrote 3 resolutions. 2 of them got accepted by one of the local counties here in Idaho, Benoit County in northern Idaho, a strong Ron Paul area. And the resolution 1 was to support President Trump's efforts as a party and support his campaign promise to end the wars in Afghanistan and bring our troops home. The other one was asking Senator Risch to, as the chairman of the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations, to hold public hearings and ferret out the truth what happened in the recently released Afghanistan Papers. And we thought that that would be an easy one to get passed. And sure enough,
Well, it looks like we're having a little communications problems today, but
well, maybe, I'm sure we can get it back on the phone, but on the line. But the Afghanistan Papers is so important, and I think that is a great intro because it proved that for 18 years they've been lying to us. The Washington Post put it up there, and then it just sort of died a death. No one's talking about it. And I think Dan is back. Hopefully, the third time's a charm, and we can hear about the Afghanistan Papers. Go ahead, Dan. Are you here with us?
Yes, I am. I'm sorry about that. I don't know what's happening, but both resolutions passed. I don't know if you heard that portion of it before we lost our connection. But both resolutions passed. One was asking Senator Risch to hold these hearings in his committee on the Afghanistan Papers and ferret out the truth like he used to do when he was the Ada County prosecutor here in Idaho, and find out who had lied to us and why American soldiers died because of those lies.
And that's a pro-troop, that's a pro-military perspective. It's you don't hate the military if you want to find out if they're getting killed for any good reason. So, well, Dan, I just want to say that the founding of the group, and I'd like to hear more about. We want to hear more about you and what put you in this direction. But I would just start by saying I think it's great that there's a group, and I know that you're nonpartisan, and that's important. But a group that's not explicitly leftist, that's not left-leaning, that takes on, if not the anti-war, at least the endless deployments in useless wars overseas approach. A lot of the groups on the left we work with, and we're an ecumenical group at the Ron Paul Institute, but a lot of times they'll throw in everything but the kitchen sink, and the actual real message gets buried in a lot of other things that are completely unrelated, where we've always felt that a grand coalition, a big coalition, an effective coalition needs to have that focus on the war issue, on the issue of the troops and endless deployments overseas. So really our hats off to you for having this specific focus.
Thank you. Yeah, we've tried to maintain political neutrality, but I think it's important that right-leaning, conservative-minded, liberty-focused veterans are the ones that are taking up the charge on this, because you're right, the Vietnam-era Veterans for Peace, Vote Vets, and groups like that from the left, they've been right on this issue for a long time. And the Democratic Party as a whole has kind of been, had that anti-war mentality up until recently. And so we feel like if there's going to be change, it's going to have to come from the right of center veterans. And who better to speak up on this than veterans themselves? Right. And so that's why we've really focused on that conservative mindset.
When I was doing the campaigning in the presidential race, I would frequently be accused of not being a pro-American and not patriotic enough, and at times even got booed for a non-interventions policy, which I thought was very American, very constitutional, and very moral. Since you've been more active in this last year, are you getting any of that type of talk, or are people showing you the respect you deserve?
Sure. Yes, we try to take that pro-Constitution approach, that if it's so important that we need to dedicate American lives and treasure from the United States taxpayers to go to one of these foreign engagements, then let's go all the way.
Sounds like the deep state is
Yeah,
interfering
you
with
know,
our
I'll
show
tell
today,
you what,
Dr.
that
Paul.
CIA, we have to watch them, you know.
Well, maybe we'll
So
try a fourth time to see if we can bring him on. If not,
one more time.
might have to close. But I think it's interesting, and I'll ask him when he comes back, when he finishes answering your question, is how did he make that journey from, hey, we don't have enough supplies, to, hey, we need to come home, you know? And I think you're back. Go ahead, Dan.
See if you can pick up, Dan.
Yeah, so we try to follow that constitutional process that if war is so important, then let's not go halfway. Let's not do it with an executive power or a War Powers Act. Let's do it the right way. Authorization of use of military force is not the right way. The Constitution is very clear about this, that Congress shall have the authority to declare war. And so we try to be very careful that we're not anti-war. Nobody likes war, but if you say you're anti-war, you do come across as almost un-American to a certain segment of the population. We're not pro-war either. I will never say I'm pro-war, but if you want to send me, my friends, my brothers and sisters off to fight and potentially die, then give us the respect of a proper authorization and debate and vote in Congress and declare war, and then let us go do our job and come right back home.
Did you get any attention this past week after the Iraqis passed a resolution that said we should leave? And of course, we were very happy with the suggestion because that's what we've argued. Did you get any attention after the Iraqi legislature took that vote?
Absolutely. The Iraqi legislature handed President Trump and the American people a gift on a platter.
Yeah.
We went there to defeat al-Qaeda and to remove Saddam Hussein and to plant the seeds of democracy, as some will argue. Well, we did that, and they exercised that democracy, and they voted in their parliament to have us leave. We should have thanked them, packed up the circus tent, and come home. And I still think President Trump has that ability to do that.
Yeah, and I think, that we talk about this a lot on this show, and we're often disappointed, but we do still think that Trump has some good instincts in this area, which is unfortunate, and I'm not the first person that said this, but, if Trump had in his hand the evidence that Soleimani was about to attack us, he should have gone to Congress. He should have said, Pelosi, I need to have a joint, session of Congress. He should have held up, he should have shown the evidence, put it all out there, and said, I want to declare war on Iran. They are declared de facto war on us. I want a declaration. If that was the case, he would have gotten it. Instead, he's been fed a line of BS from the people around him, and none other than the senator from Kentucky, who we have a great affection for, said you'd have to be brain dead to believe Pompeo with this evidence. They can get away with this, hey, we got it, but we can't show you stuff. But we need to send a few thousand troops over there. The troops don't know why they're there. What's going to happen with them? Are they being basically held hostage there to strike? So I think that's the strongest evidence for a real declaration. Here's what we've got, and we need to go to war.
Right. I think President Trump would win in 2020 in a landslide if he would return to that constitutional principle and simply go show his evidence and get a proper
Okay. I think, Daniel and Dan, under the circumstances, I think we're going to give short closing statements here, and hopefully we can get back with you on another day and figure out what's happening to our connections. So
I'm wondering what's happening to our neck. It sounds like he's back one last time.
We'll see if he's. Why don't you do a closing statement, and then I'll do a brief one, and then we'll see if Dan could close it out if he's still there.
I would just close with a quick question, just to know where people can find you and what are your plans for the immediate future. That would be my closing.
Sure. Bringourtroopshome.us is our website. We have websites in other states, but that's our national website. There's a petition you can sign, which will put your name into our registry, and we'll be able to send you information. Our next big event is actually in 22 states. It's not an event, but we've written legislation. You may have heard of it. It's called Defend the Guard. It's a opportunity for states to reclaim their 10th Amendment right. And we're asking the states to pass this legislation that would tell the governors of the states that the National Guard has a fourfold mission, and one of those missions is not to fight overseas wars. And if the military wants the state National Guard to go fight overseas, they will do that only if there's a proper declaration from Congress. And absent a declaration of war, the National Guard stays home and does their mission stateside, which is the way they were created. And so that's our next big push. We've got 20 states that are proposed pushing that legislation right now, and it was started in West Virginia by State Delegate Pat McGeehan. It's in Wyoming and in Liz Cheney's backyard by the Majority Whip, Tyler Lindholm, and what's being done here in Idaho by Lieutenant Governor Janice McGeehan and Representative Tammy Nichols. And we're excited that this is taking root, and that's a way for citizens at the local level, the closest level of engagement, to really have an effect.
That's great.
Very, very good, Dan. And we want to thank you very much for being on the show today. And I want to just talk to our viewers for a second or two here to really emphasize how important this is. But it's the deception that bothers me the most. And you can call them lies, you can call them anything, but it's pure deception, it's lies and deceit. And we give our president a pass the best we can. But this whole idea that we're supposed to believe that all this episode and the assassination was intended to prevent a war and has nothing to do with starting a war, that loses credibility. So that's what we try to do on our program here, is be as credible as we can and sort it out. That's why we're so happy, Dan, that you've been able to come on the program. And I want to thank our viewers for tuning in today. And please come back to our Liberty Report soon.